Hello, welcome to the event Growth Studies. I'm thrilled to have you here today with our great panel. Denise will be talking to us. She leads part of Informa Connect. She'll be talking to us about how she led her group that serves an industry that was devastated in 2020 into finding opportunities for growth and scale in the midst of that. And Tessa will share her experience leading marketing for On24, which I'm sure all of you have heard about lately, and what global trends they've seen in serving communities, building and helping serve events. Denise, any more introduction on your side?
Hi, no, Michael, I'm happy to be here and looking forward to really open conversation and some hearty Q&A at the end. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, and thank you all that are joining us. We will definitely have some Q&A. This is live, so we're not pre-recorded. You'll be able to ask us whatever you want, and we'll be as candid as we can. Tessa, anything else on your side?
No, it's great to be here. So for those of you who don't know, I am the VP of Marketing at On24, and we are a digital experience platform for webinars, virtual events, content experiences, and we work with thousands of marketers to help them convert their prospects into customers. So very excited to be here and share all of the best practices we've learned over the past year, especially with you.
It does feel like we've learned so much in the last, we've been talking for weeks now, the three of us, about all the things we've learned. And it's incredible the vast amount of information that has been learned in the last year. It feels like we've lived 10 years of learning in that period of time.
Yeah, saying a year feels weird. I almost had to think, it really has only been a year. What a transformation.
Exactly. And speaking of, so Denise, I think that the transformation element is a perfect lead in. Would love to understand your team serving restaurants. They're facing massive disruption. They're being devastated across the industry. Most of them are closed, having to lay off people. And in the midst of that, you and your team found opportunities to go virtual, pivot, and did it in no time. Talk us through that.
Tessa, you're right. It's hard to imagine it's been a year. And I'll say, great conversation for the group today. It's growth in the face of adversity is really what we've learned. And we'll share a little bit about our food service industry experience, but heading up marketing for a portfolio that also includes market research, marketing, innovation, sustainability, meetings, we're seeing similar trends across the board. So when we take a step back, go into March, April of 2020, restaurant industries just completely decimated. And from the event side of our portfolio, it's typically a fall annual event, limited audience. What we realized really quickly was the right course of action for our customers. Our customers needed information. They needed it really quickly. There was a tremendous amount of change happening in that marketplace. What our customers really didn't need was for us to be waiting until the end of the year to try and bring people together to share and problem solve. So worked very closely with the customers who know us, love us, with our sponsors, finger on the pulse of our marketplace. And what we learned was between restaurants closing, switching to off-premise, delivery, contactless payments, there was a burning need for information about how to keep their businesses open, how to keep their businesses viable, competitive, in particular for smaller independent restaurant owners that didn't have the operational scale or growth of some of the multi-chains. That pivoted our business into topical, pain point oriented conversations with the people who could help our customers solve their problems today. And that introduced opportunities for sponsors to be part of that conversation. So it really turned our business into bite-sized chunks, immediate value delivery, solving our customer pain points, and recognizing that this industry was changing month after month after month. So it became much more dynamic, much more community oriented, very focused on the need today. I need to know this today because I have to apply it tomorrow. And that dramatically changed the trajectory of our event, and it shifted us within 4 to 5 months into something that was much more community oriented and really redefined value delivery on both sides of the equation for our customers.
But you're also underselling what you did, I think, because from the moment that you realized you were going to have a physical event, the moment you were doing a virtual event was how long?
Our first virtual conversations were spun up in 8 weeks or less.
It's incredible. And to your point, a lot of that came from really listening and understanding your customers. Like, I love this point that in the midst of these restaurants being hammered, they had to go figure out how to drive revenue. They had to figure out how to go make things work. And you, in doing exactly what a good leader in the industry, a good servant of the industry does, went out and found ways to help them, found ways to connect them with people that could help them. Tessa, what are you seeing more broadly across On24 in terms of understanding customers and serving customers?
Yeah, a very similar trend, and I'll address it both from just what we're doing with our own marketing. I always like to say our marketing team is On24's biggest customer. we do a virtual event at least once a day, but also just from across all of the amazing examples similar to Denise's that we're seeing arise from our customer base. And I think that really, to summarize, community is a great way of putting it. I think that what has happened is typically transactional relationships between brands and vendors have turned into conversations. And it's because there is no longer this approach of having marketing simply be used for promotion or something to get someone to the value. It's actually the value. And content and marketing has become a part of the overall customer experience and the journey that someone has with that brand. And it's something that isn't fleeting. It is not for the means of just a day or 2 or 3. It is something that continues all year round and is one that involves more than just a buyer and seller relationship. It is about bringing different stakeholders together. And I think just an example of that, I'll share something we did for On24's own marketing is, when the pandemic struck, we really empathized with the digital fatigue that our customers must be feeling. Not only were their workload had gone into overdrive, but also then their audiences were likely feeling some similar aspect of the fatigue. And of course, just COVID overall, it was hard. It still is. We actually decided to do non-marketing events, and they were solely for the purposes of delivering content to our audience to help them gain a sense of empowerment, change their mindset for a day. We called it Mind Shift. And what was so interesting was the results from that event, which had nothing to do with our brand, what we sold at all, had more conversion downstream from it than a typical event where we do talk about how our solution helps someone do their job. So I think that it's just interesting to think about how digital has transformed what a brand can mean to their audience, and also really does ultimately empower the audience to be put at the center. And it's the brands and partners that recognize that, I think, that will win.
I love this idea of digital changing what a brand is to its audience. And Denise, you had a point like that as well, which are that you had 5 things you would be your top priorities in 2019, and 5 things that are your priorities now. I think that very deeply relates, right? Like, what was your brand in 2019 versus what is your brand going forward? Can you unpack that for us?
Absolutely. I mean, I think Tessa touched on it. It's really deconstructing and reconstructing your core value proposition and working in a true voice of customer-led model, right? And what we've learned, what the events industry has learned, is that is much more dynamic than it ever has been before. The opportunity has been there, and I think we've been moving towards it as an industry, but now we're here. or you need to be here, right? And so that's, when we look at our business and say, in our old model, in how we had defined value to our customer, these are the 5 things that we need to do really well. The reality is we've learned in the last 6 months that those top 5 priorities have changed. What we need to do as a business really well has been redefined. There are internal organizational pain points that we have to overcome. There are new partners we need to be leveraging. There are new amplification opportunities, when there are new ways that volumes of data that we're getting, and new ways that we can leverage data to keep our brands in that positive value conversation with our clients and our sponsors, right? It's so much more about the opportunity for our brands to be positioned so our customers can pull from us because we're a trusted source they need, rather than us pushing content out when we're ready to talk about ourselves. So really how we're looking at 2021, 2022 and beyond, those priorities have really shifted in good growth enabling ways. Painful journey to get there for sure, right? At times, I'd love to say that it was an easy ride, but it's, those good learning opportunities, learning quickly through the wins and the setbacks has really set us up for, a different trajectory in 2021 and beyond.
What are some of those focus differences, KPI differences, a number of attendees, eyeballs? What are you thinking about now that you weren't thinking about before?
I think from a data perspective, and I'm sure Tessa is seeing this with a lot of her clients as well, we have a tremendous amount of data that we can now harness to shape and improve our value propositions much more dynamically. So when we talk about the more static moment in time metrics that event organizers have used in the past, where we've got a long planning runway, we've got some good analytics, but it's really to that one end point, right? And then we've got a fantastic period of time that we can dig deep, analyze, and prepare for next year. We now have an opportunity to be learning and improving in a much more iterative manner. And our product, when you think about a media business in social media, it's what's my audience engaging in? What matters? What are they sharing? What's being amplified? How frequently are they coming back? How is this being applied to their business? So our opportunity to learn, iterate, and then get that pulse, keep our finger on the pulse of our customers and apply those learnings is a 2-week, 3-week, 4-week process, not a 4, 6, 9-month process. And I think that's one of the most exciting changes that has come out of this, is our ability to harness data much faster to deliver much more nuanced and immediate value to our customers than we ever have before.
I love that point that all of a sudden now that you're engaging with them so quickly, you're able to learn from them much more quickly and really know the community in a way that you could have never know them interacting with them only once a year, right? That's, if I'm understanding correctly.
Absolutely.
Now you can actually go, what they care about this week is this, what they'll care about in a month is this. It's like when Amazon knows what I buy and therefore knows what I'll buy next, right? And
Absolutely.
Tessa, what are you seeing across On24? How's data and the data you're being asked for changing, and what people want to know about their customers and what they want to deliver to their customers? How's that evolving?
It is evolving rapidly and in multiple dimensions. And I think that flywheel effect that Denise was talking about has really taken hold, because every experience that our customers create, they're suddenly understanding immediately what the value is that they've delivered, and on multiple scales. So now we're seeing customers understand NPS, Net Promoter Scores, through their events, because they're able to ask for it alongside them asking for typical questions about how someone liked the content, in addition to them being able to accompany that by asking about someone's pain point, as well as asking if they want to talk to sales. So suddenly you are moving from interactions that happened in, that were interspersed and not necessarily connected, to all of it being able to be conducted and captured at one time. And so people are actually starting to design experiences for the purpose of gaining insight. And I think that that is a really interesting shift. It feels intuitive to say, oh, I am doing this experience because I want to then create this next experience. But so often we're all so focused on what that actual single event or experience is, you forget. I mean, it's hard. But I think in digital, and I think with the ability to capture the data, it really helps you ensure that you're thinking about that from a cohesive, connected life cycle perspective versus just, again, that moment in time. And again, I'll use our own marketing because it is as an example. We now have standardized the kinds of data that we gather from the type of event and experience that we've created. So if we are talking to a net new audience, then the questions and the data that we're collecting is more about us trying to understand how we nurture them, how we continue to progress, how we get better at matching their interest with the content that we have to deliver. That's very, very different than a customer who's been with us for 2 years. And in those kinds of experiences, we're trying to learn more specifically about product adoption, get feedback, figure out how we can optimize our training resources for their needs. So it really has allowed for us to dramatically expand not just what experiences we create, but also what we can learn and ingest about our customers and use it in really intelligent ways. And I think that as we partner with folks like the Informa team, and we work with third parties, we're starting to think about that as well. How does this ultimately, a channel that isn't our own, how are we able to take greater ownership because of what we can learn and create that cohesive journey? It's almost like we've moved from, typically you had channels were very, very siloed, but it's the data that can actually make them consistent and connected, because as long as you are able to have the customer be at the center and understand what they need, it doesn't matter where they're engaging with you. You're able to use that engagement to ultimately drive a great experience.
It's such a great point. And it's changed how we think about it at Ingo quite a bit, because at one point in time, we would engage a customer like an Informa and on one event, and it was very episodic. And
right.
Forgive my lack of a whiteboard, but there would be this spike for 3 days or maybe a month of engagement around the event. And then it would kind of drop to zero. And then it would slowly build back up over the next 12 months back to the next event. And so what you saw was challenges around engagement, retaining people. And so when we started digging into the data, one of the things that we were discussing in advance, and I think we're pulling out here, is that these communities exist before and after the event. They existed regardless of the event before. In fact, restaurant owners and restaurateurs in New York were meeting and getting together, not as well as they would through MUFSO or through Informa, but they existed regardless. And same thing for green build. People that are passionate about the environment and commercial real estate and buildings are going to have connections and relationships in a community. But what Informa does brilliantly is bring them together and do it in a cohesive way and provide the largest event in that space. But what we've started to see is that, if you think about Denise and her team, they're the tip of the iceberg. They're the leaders of the industry, really, because they've convened that industry in this wonderful way. We had Orson Francisconi of Financial Times on it, and he talked about the convening power of the Financial Times. And I thought that's such a great point of these brands have this amazing convening power of people. And so when we started thinking about it, what we found in the data was that what the organizers are actually really good at is bringing together the leaders, the next level down in the industry, the top sponsors, the top speakers, the top whoever else it is, the top influencers in the industry. And it's those VIPs that then bring the rest of the community together. And so that's where we're starting to see a lot of opportunities. How do you continue to engage those VIPs through the rest of the year, so that you've got this cadre of people that, of course, they bring everybody else when the event actually comes around, or to the series of events as they occur. And so, Denise, to that point, you've done a lot of getting closer to the customer. I presume on the VIPs and the sponsors are kind of quintessential to that effort. How do you think about who to focus on? Because you've got events with thousands or tens of thousands of people. How do you think about where to focus and who to listen to? Because I'm sure there's a lot of signal to noise and a lot of challenges around just a lot of different ideas and thoughts on what to do.
It's a combination of, certainly for our media businesses, with our editorial staff, is just constantly a finger on the pulse of the market every minute of the day, which provides us with a great advantage. But even for our brands that don't have owned editorial arms to them, it is those, thought leader relationships and reframing how that relationship works, right, for both parties. It is still that social influencer, if you will, opportunity where we're listening. We've got a lot of just general market and social analytics where we're pulling in topics. We've got partners and one-on-one customer and sponsor relationships that's also feeding inputs. And I think when we bring those two things together and we find, the emerging conversation that needs to happen, we're starting to groom that VIP ecosystem. And I would say, that the VIP enablement, and you mentioned the tip of the iceberg, we're working down, below the sea level now, that it's not just that interaction at that moment in time, but it's people that want access to that conversation on demand, that we're repurposing that conversation into a trends piece, into a social burst. So the value of this ecosystem is so much far beyond the parameters that we considered if it was, we're bringing them on a keynote stage at the end of the year. And so that's a lot of the opportunity that we're seeing across our business, is the listening, the social listening, the partnership feedback, and who are the right individuals at the table. Then from our sales side, it's which sponsors make sense in that conversation. And that's an important component of this, right? It's another side, part of the revenue formula is, let's make sure that if it's an opportunity for a sponsor, that it makes sense for them to be in this conversation. And that's the sweet spot from a revenue opportunity, right? And if you do that formula well a few times, your market will say, and we have a phrase that we call infusing little bits of positive friction, right? If it's progressive profiling, I want a little more data about you. If it's getting that feedback loop at the end of a session, if it's the sponsor that we introduce to the conversation, that infusion of positive friction needs to make sense for the audience. And then they're motivated to stay with us in the next conversation. And that's really the formula that, that we've been building upon for many of the brands in our portfolio.
Love this point. And I think that's such a great takeaway to pull out how much value there is in your brands, Green Build, Muffso, Restaurant Rise, and so many others, the creative and the marketing brands as well. Access to thought leaders, access to some of the people doing thought leadership around new products and new solutions, and the ability to repurpose that all year long. I think that's that gets missed so readily, that when you bring all of the top people in an industry together, whether virtually or physically, you just end up with lots of great conversations, lots of great insight. You've had Barack Obama, you've had Hillary Clinton, you've had some really extraordinary leaders speak from the top levels, but all the way down, leaders in lots of industries. Your opportunity to repurpose content is extraordinary, but that's true in, I would imagine, just about every industry as well. And Tessa, are you seeing that? Are you seeing people grab opportunities and leverage content out of On24, or is that an option? How does that work?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think that the best way to think about it is digital has made events into journeys. And that's where, if you think about typically at an event, the agenda, it's all contained in a single place and someone wayfinds physically, right? And they're capturing and they're absorbing content and lessons and meeting people and networking. And now what digital does is it kind of takes that map and it squashes it, and it allows for you to think about how all those pieces that maybe once existed inside a physical environment can now become an ongoing journey that allows for someone to navigate and wayfind on their own terms and in the format that they like. So we see people, I like to think of it as an evolution of events, where we see people take single events that they do weekly, package them together into a customer training environment, a customer day. Then that day gets packaged together, multiple days of those multiple series get packaged together into a large quarterly conference. And then it gets packaged and built and made into singular modules once again. And so that is absolutely a huge trend. SAP has been a longtime customer of ours. They are phenomenal at doing this, and they were doing it before COVID. Several of their business units have been all digital from an event perspective for the past few years, and it's because of that ability to repurpose and orchestrate content with it all being digital that they really felt like was an advantage. And it wasn't just an advantage for them, but it was an advantage for their audience. And in particular, because their audience were small business owners for this specific software unit, they found that a physical event was never going to work. It required a small business owner to leave their business. They could not afford it. And so it's just interesting because they were ahead of the time, and it was simply because they were adapting their content delivery, their experience creation for the needs of their audience. And now I think that has become understood as sort of the best practice, with then physical being added on top to help create an exclamation point or a culminating moment inside that journey. It's not a separate one. And I think that's really what I feel like is so incredible, is that in just a year, we've been able to rethink and merge physical and we'll eventually be able to merge physical and digital world and think about everything like a journey, so that physical can coexist with digital and maintain that community connection all year round and for many years to come.
Yeah, I think from this conversation and some of the others, what we'll hear less is hybrid and a lot more about community. The real idea is going to be that the digital and the community engagement persists through digital all year long. And then I love the exclamation point of those are the moments of really bringing the community together and really celebrating the community and making it more also hopefully celebratorial. So question on this before we have to wrap up, Denise, this point about community is great and it's very exciting and extending content, but how do you transition, or how do you evolve what getting sponsors to sponsor something physical to getting sponsors to sponsor something digital?
From our sales community perspective, we have to zoom out a little bit and consider our competitive industry event is no longer our top competitor. We're competing with LinkedIn, right? I mean, so and insert other digital opportunities there. And so we've reframed the opportunity. I think this has given us an opportunity, again, that hyper relevant content where more of the audience is pulling from us to get access to that solution is an incredibly powerful sales pitch, right? So the audience is so much more curated, it's so much more qualified. And when you think about it in the wider landscape, right, of lead generation, relationship nurturing from our sponsors' perspective, this is the great mix of, the pure digital and what face-to-face does well, right? Is that curation and that audience curation and that nurturing effect. And that's how we've reframed the conversation with our sponsors. And for those that are looking for brand awareness, you still have those opportunities. For those that are really looking for highly qualified leads, small conversations with the right audience, a community-oriented product suite better serves those objectives. And so to Tessa's point, we're seeing much more variety in the ecosystem, has multiple opportunities now throughout the year that better fit our sponsors' business objectives, and that those business objectives will change over time. And so it's really taking a step back and saying, okay, now let's look more holistically at the product set and our customers' objectives and their target audience, and see how we can make those connection points across our product and our advertising opportunities. And so we're so much more like a LinkedIn than we are, like our businesses 2 years ago. And that's a good thing, but it's reframing it for our sales staff and for our customers to get there. Now, again, it's not a flip the switch. We're still working towards that in tough economic times, but our early indicators are our customers really like where we're going. It's sticky. And I think it's not just a gap. I think this is, the long term. And I think a lot of us are seeing that as the case.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Tessa.
I just can't agree with that more. And I think as a sponsor with that hat on, what I feel like has been able to change is suddenly we are working with our partners as true partners in a campaign, in a community, in that full journey. Before, I almost had events off as something else. I built my campaign, and then separately it was, oh, here are the big events that we're sponsoring. And now what I'm able to do is actually infuse them into the campaign and make them a part of the full integrated plan. And I think that has not only transformed our marketing, made it more effective, but it also ultimately benefits our partner, because now you are a part of our campaign. You're not a sideline. And I think that is something that has been really incredible, and also I believe has encouraged us to invest more in sponsorship opportunities, because I can go and say, oh, let's talk about doing a promotional email drip campaign and a display advertising, and then we'll have this session, and then here's the roundtable that we'll do after. And it becomes this conversation that thinks through a year or 2-year partnership versus a single event sponsorship. And I really think that has improved the value for everyone involved.
Yeah, that's where we're seeing a lot of excitement with Ingo being able to identify who the VIPs, people that are driving lots of activity. Once you can identify where they're driving the activity, you can do some really interesting things with sponsors, where you go to the sponsor and you say, oh, you're trying to reach these people. Well, the VIPs who influence those people, we can have them for a webinar. We can do a summit with them. We can do a white paper with them. And Denise, to your point, it's not one thing. And Tessa, you're saying the same thing. It's not like you're doing one thing. You're doing an event which has video content for later, which has textual content for later, which can have survey questions, which can do lead gen, which can then turn into one-on-one meetings and conversations. The amount of potential it unlocks is extraordinary. And so we've had a couple questions, and that's why I wanted to drive this question around what makes revenue happen? How do you actually make money? Because it's great to serve a community and have conversations, but it's tricky to actually generate cash off of that to pay for all of these things. I think we're all, the number of people this year who have spent so much time just rescheduling physical events, I just feel bad for them because it's so unfulfilling. But there is this hope. And I think, Denise, your team really represents it in terms of not only, okay, yeah, we had a rescheduled physical, but then we so quickly launched and served into the industry by shifting the focus away from how painful rescheduling physical events are to, okay, yes, that's true, but let's go serve these people. And I think that's that focus of how do we serve our sponsors? How do we serve the community? There's still a lot of value to be created there.
Yeah, I agree. And from the monetization side, I would say two things. When you get that, when you get that urgent conversation, or that really opportunistic conversation, the right people in the room together, be it virtually or in person, you're creating a tremendous amount of value for all participants, right? And we're expanding the ways in which we can do that. So I would say, we all need to keep sight of, we're still delivering premium value that commands price, right? So we're not in the business of continuing to just, produce and produce and produce, and there's no pay to play component to it, right? So we're the curation, the specificity of the audience, there is still a premium value component to what we're doing. Is just being redefined, and it's being broken up into smaller chunks, right? In a variety of different formats, right? So it's reframing, I think, that view about the product delivery. And on the sponsor side, it's the same thing. And Tessa makes a great point about, thinking along lines of the continuity of delivering against your client's business objectives. The fact that we're much more powerful on the metrics side, right? So we're now in a position to say, sponsors looking for X, I can deliver against that. Here's the proof of that value. How can I help you then take those new leads further down your funnel, further through your journey? Here are my next opportunities. So that is what's changed the revenue and the monetization landscape for us, is that premium layer and that different journey of curation and value delivery on the sponsor side. And it's there.
The one thing I was going to say too is the data's there too.
Yes.
Suddenly, it's not just a front end. There's also a back end aspect. So you can prove the value. You can say these many, not just how many leads you got, but how engaged they were, which ones were able to actually raise their hand and say they wanted a demo or a meeting. So I think, again, coming at it from the opposite side, I just love everything Denise is saying, because there is just almost, I feel like, more to monetize because there is more value to gain.
Yeah, if you think about it, I've got this, I'm going to put my marketer, Ingo, business development hat on, because Tessa's done that very nicely.
We're all marketers inside.
All marketers.
Marketers, that's right. And when I put that hat on, I think about LinkedIn and competition and Google and competition, but then I think about the opportunity, which is, yeah, I want to do deals all year long, and but the opportunity, which would be, Denise's team is saying, hey, these people are looking for your solution right now. We're going to start getting you in front of them through a couple of virtual events, through a couple of articles, and maybe some ads, and maybe some emails. And then we're going to get you in front of them in a hosted buyer virtual setting, or through a webinar setting, a more intimate setting. And then, oh, by the way, you're actually going to transact. You're actually going to close the deal or follow up on the deal in real life at Greenbuild, at Mufso, at Restaurant Buys. That's a dream, right? You've taken the best of digital, targeted, precise, timely, immediate, and combined it with the best of physical, which is actually seeing humans, actually having a meal together, a coffee together, a drink together. That's wonderful. And I think that's the future we're driving towards, which I think is incredibly exciting.
Yeah, I agree. And what you're also offering is the buyer engagement.
Yes.
The event is the conduit, but ultimately is, as you started that conversation, what you're offering is engagement with a buyer and then a number of means to do it. And that is this reverse that has happened. And I think we all as marketers and as brands are really benefiting from that.
Yeah, absolutely. The event is no longer the one finish line. Right. It's one path in many paths on an always on journey, which is where there's tremendous opportunities.
I think that's a great takeaway, and a thank you to both of you for this time on talking about communities. I love the point about it's all about the journey, right? You're not just ending at the event. I think that's a great final takeaway as we have to wrap up. But thank you both so much. Really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you to the hundreds that joined in and shared your questions and got to take part in this with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Great to be on with you both.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks,
Thank you so much, everyone.